Hello and welcome to my third learning module. For this learning module, I have chosen to create a MakerSpace lesson plan. I've created a lesson plan about pourquoi-tails. So we will be discussing what a pourquoi-tail is and how do I organize a pourquoi-tail and write a pourquoi-tail. The recommended grade level for this lesson is third grade. We have been discussing narrative writing for quite some time now, so students are very familiar with narrative writing, but pourquoi-tails are kind of new this week. So the materials that are needed are a writing organizer that I will show you later, line paper, and arts and crafts materials for a skit that they will be doing. So students will plan and write out a pourquoi-tail with their group. Once the story is written, students will then create a play and act out their pourquoi-tail. So the know and what they will be able to do, students will understand the parts of a narrative, the beginning, middle, and end. Students will also understand the plot structure, the problem and solution, setting, and more. Students will understand and be able to write a pourquoi-tail. Some vocabulary are pourquoi-tail, conflict, resolution, and setting. Our essential questions are: what is the structure of a narrative? And how do I successfully plan and write a pourquoi-tail? So like I said earlier, we have already been working on narratives for a while now. So they do know the structure of the narrative, but it's putting it into place with that pourquoi-tail. Differentiation, I use a lot of differentiation in my classroom because I have been teaching the special ed inclusion classroom for the past 3 years now. All students are given a writing organizer, which allows for students to get their thoughts down on paper before organizing it into sentences. If you look down here as well, all students are given the beginning, middle, and end narrative cards that will be available to students in their materials bin in the middle of each group table. So both of those things are just provided to the groups. There's not students that are singled out and just given. I'm not just giving it to those students because I do feel like that is kind of calling them out, and I do feel like in third grade they can become embarrassed by those kinds of things. So the beginning, middle, and end narrative cards look like this. And this can help any of my students. It can help the special ed students, the lower level students, or even my middle or high students who just need a little reminder. So the beginning, it just tells them to establish the situation and gives them some questions. It also tells them to introduce the characters. In the middle, they're going to describe the problem and explain how the characters respond to the problem. And at the end, they're going to provide a solution and get to the point, which is the message or the purpose of the narrative. So also, students will be heterogeneously grouped so that there will be different levels of reading and writing in each group to allow students to bring different strengths and weaknesses to the table. They will be able to learn from their peers and their peer skills. Some of the below level students will have support from the teacher and the teacher's aide to help get their thoughts on a sticky note and transfer this to the organizer by placing the sticky notes in the preferred areas. The teacher and the teacher's aide will write on the sticky notes for these students so that the writing barrier does not interfere with their thoughts and the pourquoi-tail. And I use this on a daily basis for all subjects, across all subjects, for these students who are performing at a kindergarten or first grade level in my classroom, and they really just can't write at that third grade level, and it is a writing barrier, and it does interfere with what they're thinking and trying to get their thoughts on paper. So our objectives are that students will be able to understand the structure of a narrative, and students will be able to plan and write a pourquoi-tail. The Common Core standard that is used during this lesson is a writing standard, a third grade writing standard. They will write narratives to develop real or imagined experiences or events using effective technique, descriptive detail, and clear event sequences. So this activity does not necessarily connect to math or science, but it can, depending on what the students choose as their topic. So students may need to think about scientific concepts depending on the topic they select for their pourquoi tale. Just a lesson overview, students will learn the structure of a narrative and the purpose of a pourquoi tale. Students will then apply this knowledge to plan and write a pourquoi tale with their group. Students will plan and act out a play to tell their pourquoi tale to the class. The prior knowledge that students have already learned the structure of a narrative, have read a simple pourquoi tale. We've also actually read about why the pollywogs wiggle. And then we've also written one as a class. Students have learned and understand the structure and event sequence of a narrative. Students are familiar with the tools available to them as resources, anchor charts, symbol cards, and writing organizers. We've utilized all these tools throughout the year with narrative writing anyway. Students will be given their assignment task card. The task card will explain that the students will work in their groups to plan and write a pourquoi tale. The task card will also explain that once the tale is written, the group will plan and act out their tale for the class using props. And then I will also use this time for questions and answers from students. All right, so since this is a group activity, for day one, what's going to happen is the task cards are going to be given to students and explained by the instructor. I will provide, as I explained earlier, I'm going to provide question and answer time for students to clarify any misunderstandings or concerns. Students will work in groups to decide a why question to answer for their pourquoi tale on the first day. Some examples may include, why do tigers have stripes? Why do frogs have long tongues? Once the question is agreed on, we will make a list of the group's questions on the board. Groups will then start working on the planning of their tale using an organizer that labels each part of the story, the beginning, middle, and end. So this is the organizer right here. So it's very similar to those cards that I showed you earlier, the beginning, middle, and end cards. It has the same pictures, very similar questions, and tells them what to do, establish the situation, introduce the characters in the beginning. In the middle, they're going to describe a problem, and then they're going to explain how the characters respond to the problem. And then in the end, they're going to provide a solution and the point. During this lesson, students will have jobs, actually throughout the whole group task, students will have these jobs. Students are already familiar with these jobs because we do use them across subject areas. Students are very familiar with them, and they're actually even in their group bins. They use them on a daily basis, and my students, the past couple classes that I've had, have used these jobs, and they're very familiar with them. I make sure they're familiar with them from the beginning of the year. So we have Facilitator is going to make certain that everyone in the group shares their opinion and participates. The materials collector is going to retrieve a set of writing organizers from the teacher table. The note taker is going to be all students. I did decide that rather than just having one note taker, I think it's necessary for all students to record. Even though they're writing the same thing, I think it's helpful for all students to follow along and make sure they're writing down so that no students are lost in this process. And then the team members are all of the students in the group. They participate in team discussions, they bring their own thinking to the group, and they're responsible for their own learning and responsibilities. On day 2, as a whole group, we're going to discuss transition words and sequencing words to enhance the tales. During their work time, students will work together in their groups to finish their organizer and start their writing of their pourquoi tale. Each student should contribute ideas on how to make the tale more entertaining for the reader, and students should be able to write their beginning and middle of their tale in the time given, using those transition words and sequencing words that we talked about during whole group. And to close day 2 out, groups will share out the conflict that will take place in their tale. On day 3, we will discuss as a whole group the dialogue and how it enhances the tale. We will go over punctuation and quotation marks when using dialogue and writing. And I will allow students to do what's called a response chain of synonyms for the word said. During the work time, students are going to work together in their groups to finish writing their pourquoi tale. Each student should contribute their ideas on how to make the tale more entertaining for the reader, such as dialogue. Students should be able to finish their pourquoi tale with the time given, and students will edit their writing when finished. To close out day 3, I will have students share out the resolution that will take place in their tale. And on day 4, as a whole group, we will go over procedures for creating the skit. We will showcase materials and props that will be available for the students. So by that, I just mean that on my back counter, I'm going to show them all the materials, the different things that I've collected for them, such as posters, recycled materials, anything that, and they can even request more items if needed, and I will get them for them on day 5. So once the group has shown evidence, I skipped. Discuss expectations. We will discuss expectations for the skit, such as everyone participating in the skit must reflect the tale the group has written. During work time, students will plan and prepare their skit. The recorder will jot down ideas on paper. So again, the recorder is going to be everybody. The facilitator will then bring their outline of the skit to be approved by the instructor. And then once the group has shown evidence of readiness, groups will be able to start preparing props and practicing their skits. To close day 4, we will share any complications so far and how their group resolved them. On day 5, students will be given 15 minutes to practice and act out once more and prepare their skit. They could have also done that on day 4 if they finished early. Groups will go one at a time, sharing their skits with the class. Each skit will be recorded on using the class iPad so that we can look back later on. As a group, they can look back and they can use that to self-assess themselves. So after each skit, I will be asking the audience what happened in the beginning of the story, what was the conflict of the story, and how was the conflict resolved. So that'll keep the audience engaged. And then for the assessment, students will be assessed on the structure and writing of the group narrative. Students will also complete a self and group evaluation that will be graded. So seeing that recording will help them to jog their memory and self-assess them and their group. Students will use the independence of choosing their own topic and incorporating their creative ideas to construct a pourquoi tale with their group. Students have endless possibilities to be creative and unique when using details in their narrative as well as the skit. The MakerSpace may not be trial and error, as it is generally like a subject such as science. However, this MakerSpace encourages students to be creative in their writing and even acting skills. So this MakerSpace will help students learn to express their thoughts and opinions while accepting the thoughts and opinions of others. I believe the freedom and choices the students get to have will spark their interest and engagement. At least that is what I hope. So thank you, and that is my learning module number 3.